The night before her wedding, Clara Evans sat alone in her hotel room, the soft hum of Seattle's skyline whispering through the half-open window. The city lights blinked like restless stars, and the distant sound of cars filled the silence between her racing thoughts. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the day she would marry Daniel Harrison, a man who was kind, patient, and safe. Everyone said he was perfect for her. But perfection didn't silence the ache in her chest. She had spent the evening surrounded by laughter and champagne, her bridesmaids giddy and glowing, the air full of talk about dresses, flowers, and forever. Now, with the room empty, the reality of tomorrow pressed down like a weight she couldn't lift. Her wedding gown hung across the room, ivory and elegant, shimmering under the warm light. It looked like a dream, beautiful, distant, and almost too fragile to touch. Clara tried to calm her heart. She sat near the window, still wearing her pale silk robe, her hair loose, her makeup washed away. She wanted quiet a few last hours before everything changed. The bouquet she'd made herself lay beside her on the table, its soft scent of jasmine and roses filling the air. For a moment, she closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer for peace, for certainty, for the courage to love without fear. And then came the knock. It was faint at first, almost hesitant. She thought she imagined it, but then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps that sent a shiver down her spine. Clara frowned and checked the clock. It was nearly midnight. Maybe it was one of her friends checking in, or a hotel staff member with a message. She wasn't expecting anyone else. She walked to the door, heart thudding softly in her chest. When she opened it, the air seemed to leave the room. There, standing in the dim hallway, was Ethan Reed, her college sweetheart. The man she had loved first, maybe never stopped loving completely. He looked older now, broader shoulders, tired eyes, a trace of stubble across his jaw. His suit was slightly wrinkled, as if he had driven through the night to get there. In his hand he held a single white rose. "Clara," he said, his voice low and uneven, "I know I shouldn't be here." She froze, unable to find words. Her mind raced back 2 years ago to laughter in tiny coffee shops, late-night drives by the lake, the way he used to promise forever. And then to the day he walked away, chasing a job in another city, leaving her heart shattered in silence. She had spent months trying to forget the sound of his name. "Ethan," she finally whispered, "why are you here?" He swallowed hard, eyes full of guilt. "Because tomorrow you're marrying someone else. And if I didn't come tonight, I'd regret it for the rest of my life." Clara felt her chest tighten. "You shouldn't be here," she repeated softly, though her voice lacked strength. "I know," he said again, stepping inside as if afraid she might close the door on him forever. "But before you make your vows, I need to say mine. Just once. To you?" The room fell silent. The city outside kept shining. Unaware that time had stopped for 2 people who used to believe they were unbreakable, Ethan took a deep breath, his words rushing out like someone afraid they'd be stolen away. "I've tried to move on, Clara. I really have. But every time I thought I'd found peace, I saw your face in my mind. Every song, every quiet night, every time I thought about what love really means, it was always you." Clara shook her head slightly, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "You left me, Ethan. You chose your career, your plans, everything but me. And now you come back the night before my wedding. What are you expecting?" "I'm not expecting anything," he said quickly, voice trembling. "I just needed to tell you that I never stopped loving you. I thought time would erase it, but it didn't. Maybe you'll marry him tomorrow, and maybe that's what's right. But I had to let you know, once more, that someone in this world still loves you like the first day he met you." His honesty broke something inside her. She turned away, wiping her tears before they could fall. "You can't say this to me now. It's too late." "I know it is," he whispered. "I just couldn't stay silent anymore." The silence that followed felt heavy, filled with years of unspoken apologies. For a moment, she almost believed she could still see them as they were young, fearless, laughing under streetlights, making promises neither of them could keep. Finally, Ethan placed the white rose on the table beside her bouquet. "I won't stay long," he said softly. I just wanted to see you one last time, to wish you happiness, even if it's not with me." Clara looked up at him then, really looked. There was no anger left in his eyes, only sadness and something deeper, almost like peace. Maybe he'd finally accepted what she was about to live. Maybe she had too. She nodded gently. "Thank you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a small, broken smile that reminded her of the boy she once loved. "Goodbye, Clara." And just like that, he was gone. The door closed softly behind him, leaving only the faint echo of his footsteps and the faint smell of roses in the air. Clara stood still for a long time, staring at the door as if it might open again. The rose looked too pure, too symbolic, a ghost from her past resting beside her future. She took a deep breath and sat down by the window once more. Her heart was racing, her thoughts spinning wildly. The night before vows, she had imagined it peaceful, calm, simple. But now it felt like a storm had passed through her heart and left it trembling, outside. The city lights flickered gently, as if winking at her confusion. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and the world carried on like nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside that quiet hotel room, everything had changed. Clara picked up the rose and twirled it between her fingers. It was soft, beautiful, and full of memories she could never return to. She wondered if love ever truly disappeared, or if it simply learned to live quietly in the corners of the heart. She thought about Daniel, his gentle patience, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. He was steady where Ethan had been reckless, safe where Ethan had been uncertain. And yet, for one fleeting moment, her heart still ached for the boy, who had come back too late. She set the rose down and looked at her reflection in the dark glass. The woman staring back wasn't the same girl who once believed love would fix everything. She was stronger now, wiser, and about to make a promise that would define the rest of her life. But before she could steady her breath, before she could even close her eyes, another sound broke the silence. Another knock, dot softer, this time slower, but real. Her heart stopped. She turned toward the door, pulse pounding, wondering who could possibly come now in the same night, in the same storm of emotions. And as she took a hesitant step forward, she knew that this night, the night before her vows, was far from over. Clara stood still, staring at the door long after Ethan had gone. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest, trying to calm the storm inside. The white rose he left behind seemed to glow faintly under the warm light, a quiet reminder of everything she once felt. She wanted to forget, to breathe, to focus on tomorrow, but her heart wouldn't listen. The past had come knocking when she least expected it. And now every old memory was alive again. She walked to the window, opening it wider to let in the cold air. It brushed against her face, sharp and real. The city below was still moving, lights flashing, cars passing. People living while her world felt stuck between two choices. The life she was about to start, and the one that never really ended. Clara took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "It's over. He's gone." She tried to believe it. But before the words could settle, another knock echoed through the room. Her heart jumped. She turned toward the door, frozen in disbelief. Another visitor. At this hour? She hesitated for a moment, half afraid it might be Ethan again. But the knock came once more. A little firmer this time, almost urgent. Slowly she crossed the room and opened the door. Standing there was Mark Reynolds, her fiancé Daniel's best friend. Clara blinked, stunned. Mark looked nothing like his usual confident self. His eyes were tired, his hair a mess. And there was a look on his face she had never seen before. A mix of guilt, fear, and something she couldn't name. "Mark," she said softly, confused. "What are you doing here?" He exhaled, as if the question itself hurt. "I know it's late," he began, voice trembling slightly, "and I know I shouldn't be here. But I had to see you. Just once, before tomorrow." Clara frowned. "You and Daniel, is something wrong?" "Did something happen?" Mark shook his head quickly. "No, Daniel's fine. Everything's fine. It's me who's not. He stepped inside slowly, looking down as if afraid to meet her eyes. She could sense something heavy coming, something that would change the air just as Ethan's visit had. "Mark," she said carefully, "you're scaring me." "What's going on?" He looked up then, and she saw the truth in his expression before he even spoke. His eyes held the same storm she had seen earlier in Ethan's longing. Regret, love that had been buried too long. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "I can't stand beside Daniel tomorrow, watch him marry you, and pretend it doesn't break me." Clara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" He took another step closer, his voice shaking now. "I love you, Clara. I've loved you for years. Since the first time I saw you at Daniel's party, the way you laughed, the way you looked at life. I tried to ignore it, to bury it, but it never went away." She stared at him, stunned. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. "Mark, don't say this. Not tonight. Not before the wedding." "I have to," he said, his tone raw. "You deserve honesty, and I deserve to finally say it. I've watched you fall in love with him, watched you plan this perfect life. And all the while, I've been pretending I was happy for you. But I'm not. I can't be." Clara took a step back, shaking her head slowly. "You're Daniel's best friend. You know what this means?" "You can't. I know exactly what it means," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "And I hate myself for it. But I'd hate myself even more if I stayed silent forever." She turned away, unable to face the intensity in his eyes. The air felt heavy again, like it did when Ethan had stood there hours earlier. "Mark, this isn't fair. You're putting me in an impossible position. Tomorrow I'm marrying Daniel. You both are supposed to be in my life, and now." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly fighting his own emotions. "I'm sorry, Clara. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm not asking you to choose. I just needed to tell you the truth before I lose the chance forever." She finally looked at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why tell me this when everything is already set? Because I can't stand the thought of watching you walk down that aisle and knowing you never knew," he said. "I need you to know that someone has loved you quietly all this time, deeply. Honestly, without expecting anything in return." Clara's heart ached. Mark wasn't lying. She could feel it, the truth in his trembling voice, the sincerity in his gaze. He had always been there, helping her, encouraging her, listening when she was unsure. She'd always thought it was friendship. Maybe she never wanted to see more. "Mark," she said softly, "you're a good man. You've been there for both of us, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. But you can't do this now. Tomorrow is my wedding day." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. And I promise I won't say another word after tonight. I just couldn't carry it anymore." The silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward, it was full, heavy with emotions neither of them could explain. Clara wished she could erase this night, wished she could go back to the peace she had before the first knock. But deep down, she knew this was life, messy, complicated, full of hearts that didn't always follow reason. Mark walked toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "If you ever doubt what love really feels like," he said quietly, "remember this moment. Remember that you were loved in silence without asking for it, without needing to give anything back." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop him. "Goodbye, Mark," she said softly. He gave her a faint smile, the kind that carried both relief and sorrow, then left. The door closed gently, and once again the room was silent. Clara stood there, her thoughts spinning faster than ever. Two men had come to her room in one night. One from her past, one from her present life. Both had confessed their love. Both had left her heart trembling. It was almost too much to take in. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bouquet she had made earlier. The rose from Ethan lay next to it, still fresh and white, while Mark's words echoed in her head. Loved in silence. It was haunting, beautiful, and painful all at once. She pressed her palms together and closed her eyes. Maybe love wasn't about perfect timing. Maybe it was about courage, saying what you feel even when you know it might break you. But still, a question lingered deep inside her. Why tonight? Why all this now when tomorrow she was supposed to promise her forever to someone else? The clock on the wall ticked past 1. Outside, the city began to quiet. Clara lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart torn between gratitude and confusion, and then, just as her breathing began to slow, there was another sound. A third knock, soft, gentle, almost familiar. Her eyes flew open, and a strange calm washed over her. She already knew who it was. The only man left who hadn't yet come to her door, Daniel, her groom. The night before vows wasn't over. It was just beginning. Clara froze when she heard the soft knock. It was past 1 in the morning, and she had already lived a lifetime of emotions in just a few hours. 2 men had come to her door tonight, one from her past, one from her present, both leaving her shaken and full of questions she wasn't ready to answer. Her hands were still trembling when the knock came again, steady and calm this time. She knew who it was before she even reached for the handle. When she opened the door, there stood Daniel, her groom, the man she was supposed to marry in less than 12 hours. He wasn't dressed formally, just in his gray sweater and jeans, hair slightly tousled as if he, too, hadn't slept. In his hands were 2 steaming cups of tea. His smile was small but warm, the kind that reached his eyes even in silence. "I thought you might still be awake," he said softly, stepping inside. "Couldn't sleep myself. The hotel feels too quiet tonight." Clara's heart beat faster. After everything that had happened, seeing him there, steady, calm, kind, felt both comforting and terrifying. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked, trying to sound normal. He shook his head and handed her one of the cups. "Big day tomorrow. Guess I'm allowed to be a little nervous." She smiled faintly and took the tea. The warmth against her hands was soothing. "Nervous? You? You're always the calm one." Daniel chuckled quietly. "Not tonight." He sat on the sofa near the window, looking out at the city lights. "I kept thinking about how strange it is. One day you're 2 separate people, and the next you promise to build an entire life together. It's beautiful, but it's also scary, isn't it?" Clara joined him by the window. For a moment, neither spoke. The city glowed beneath them, soft and distant, like another world entirely. The quiet between them was peaceful, but her heart was anything but. She wanted to tell him about Ethan and Mark, the unexpected visits, the confessions, but fear held her back. She didn't want to ruin the calm he brought with him. Instead, she asked gently, "Daniel, do you ever wonder if love changes after marriage?" He turned to her, curious. "Changes how?" "I mean," she said, searching for the right words, "once you make the promises, once you start the life together, does it still feel the same?" He smiled, thoughtful. "Maybe not the same, but maybe that's the point. Love isn't supposed to stay frozen. It's supposed to grow even when it hurts. It's supposed to bend, not break." Clara looked at him, the honesty in his voice calming her racing heart. He didn't speak like a man trying to be perfect. He spoke like someone who understood that love required work, patience, and courage. "You're not afraid of what's ahead?" she asked quietly. "Oh, I am," he said with a laugh. "I'm terrified." "But fear doesn't mean doubt, Clara. It means I care about getting it right." His words sank deep into her chest. He didn't know it, but he was answering the question she hadn't even asked out loud. She sipped her tea, trying to steady herself. "You really believe love is a choice?" "I do," he said simply. "You can't control who walks into your life, but you can control who you walk with every day. I don't expect perfection from you, and I hope you don't expect it from me. I just want honesty, even when it's hard." Those last words struck her harder than he knew. Honesty, the very thing she was withholding. Guilt tugged at her, and she almost confessed everything. Ethan's return, Mark's late-night visit, the emotions that left her shaken. But when she looked at Daniel, the man who brought her peace after chaos, her voice caught in her throat. He noticed her silence. "Clara," he said softly, "you seem distant. Is everything okay?" She forced a small smile. "I'm just tired, that's all. It's been a long day." He nodded, not pressing further. Instead, he reached for her hand. His touch was steady, warm, grounding. "You know," he said, "I used to think love was about finding someone who made everything easy. But the truth is, love is about finding someone who stays when things aren't easy." Clara's chest tightened. That was Daniel, the man who stayed. Through her doubts, through her overthinking, through her fears of repeating past mistakes. He never demanded, never rushed. He simply stood by her. They sat together quietly, sipping tea, watching the lights fade as the night deepened. The weight in her heart began to shift, not vanish, but soften. After a long pause, Daniel spoke again. "You know, I was thinking tonight about vows. Everyone writes these perfect speeches all about forever and happiness. But I think real vows should be about the small things." Clara tilted her head. "Like what?" He smiled. "Like promising to listen, even when it's inconvenient. To say sorry first, even when you're not sure who's right. To make tea when the other can't sleep." His simplicity disarmed her. There was something powerful about how he loved quietly, without drama, without needing to prove anything. "Daniel," she said softly, "you're a good man." He looked at her then. Really looked, his expression open and sincere. "I don't know if I'm good. I just know I love you. And I want us to keep choosing each other no matter what storms come." Tears stung her eyes. For the first time all night, she felt something solid beneath her emotions, a truth she could hold on to. Love wasn't about the grand gestures or the perfect timing. It was about this: two people awake at midnight. Facing uncertainty together, Daniel reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You should try to get some sleep," he said gently. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Clara nodded. "You too." He stood, placed his empty cup on the table, and lingered for a moment near the door. "Clara," he said quietly, "whatever happens, I want you to remember you don't owe me perfection. Just honesty and heart. That's all I've ever wanted." Her throat tightened. She could barely speak. "You'll always have that," she whispered. He smiled and leaned down to kiss her forehead. A simple, tender gesture that said everything he didn't put into words. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Clara stood in the quiet room, her hands still warm from where he had held them. The rose from Ethan and the untouched teacup from Mark still sat on the table. Silent witnesses to the night's confessions. 3 men had come to her door, each carrying a truth. Each showing her a different face of love. Ethan had reminded her of the love that once burned bright and faded. Mark had revealed the kind of love that hides quietly in the shadows. But Daniel had shown her love that stayed, that didn't need to shout to be real. As dawn began to color the horizon, Clara sat by the window again, her thoughts finally calm. The city was waking up, unaware that her heart had just survived the longest, most revealing night of her life. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: love wasn't about who arrived first or who confessed last. It was about who stayed when the world grew quiet. And as the first light touched her face, she whispered softly to herself, "He stayed." Morning arrived quietly, slipping through the thin curtains like a secret. The pale light touched every corner of the hotel room, chasing away the shadows that had filled it just hours before. Clara Evans sat on the edge of her bed, still in her robe, her eyes tired but clear. She hadn't slept a minute. The night had been too heavy for rest. 3 visitors, 3 confessions. And a storm of emotions she was only beginning to understand. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars hummed on the wet streets, and distant church bells marked the start of a new day. Her wedding day. Clara took a slow breath and walked to the mirror. Her reflection looked older somehow, not in years, but in heart. The girl who had been uncertain at midnight was gone. The woman staring back at her now carried the weight of truth and choice. She touched the white rose on the table, the one Ethan had brought. And then her gaze drifted to the half-empty teacup Daniel had left behind. Both symbols of love, but so different. One belonged to the past, fragile and nostalgic. The other belonged to now, steady and real. The hotel room phone rang, breaking her thoughts. It was the wedding planner, confirming timing and car arrangements. Clara answered softly, her voice calm, almost distant. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. Yet nothing felt the same. She hung up and walked toward the window. The sky was gray but gentle, the kind of morning that carried quiet promise. The city felt softer than usual, as if even the air knew how much today meant. Her bridesmaids were due soon, but for now she was alone, and she needed that. The night before had tested her in ways she never expected. Ethan had reminded her of who she once was, young, hopeful, wild with dreams. Mark had shown her how love can hide, silent and patient, waiting for courage. But Daniel had shown her something deeper, something that didn't fade or rush. He had shown her love that stayed steady even when the world trembled. A soft knock came at the door. She knew it couldn't be anyone else but him. Clara opened the door, and there stood Daniel again, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, his jacket draped over his arm. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried warmth that reached straight to her heart. "Good morning," he said gently. "Good morning," she replied, surprised to see him so early. "I thought you weren't supposed to see me before the wedding." He smiled. "I know, but I figured rules can wait. I wanted to see you one more time before everything begins." Clara stepped aside, letting him in. "You couldn't sleep either." He shook his head. "No, my mind was too full. I kept thinking about us, about how far we've come." She poured him a glass of water and handed it over. They sat by the window again, the same spot they had shared last night. The city below shimmered under the morning light, and for a moment neither spoke. There was no rush, no pressure, only quiet understanding. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Clara, before we get married today, I want to say something honest. Not romantic, not poetic, just real." She turned to him, her heart tightening slightly. He continued, "I know love isn't always easy. I know marriage won't fix everything. There will be days when we disagree, when we disappoint each other, when life feels heavier than either of us can carry alone. But I promise to try every single day, to listen, to understand, to be the person who stands beside you even when things aren't perfect." Clara's throat tightened. His words were simple, but they were everything she needed. No grand promises, no illusions, just truth. She looked down at her hands. "You always make things sound so clear," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "Because I've learned that love isn't supposed to be a mystery. It's supposed to be a choice you make again and again, even when it's hard." Clara met his gaze, and in that moment, she felt something settle inside her, a calm certainty that had been missing for years. The chaos of last night, the emotions, the doubts, all of it seemed to fade into the background. She took his hand gently. "I'm scared sometimes," she admitted. "Not of you, but of myself. Of making mistakes. Of not being enough." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You're human. You'll make mistakes. So will I. But that's what makes love real. It's not about being perfect. It's about staying when it's hard. It's about choosing each other anyway." Her eyes filled with tears. But this time they weren't from confusion. They were from clarity. She had spent so long chasing the idea of perfect love that she almost forgot love was supposed to be imperfect, raw, honest, and flawed. Daniel brushed a tear from her cheek. "You don't have to be sure about everything, Clara. You just have to be sure about today." She nodded slowly, her heart steady now. "I am," she said softly. "I'm sure." He smiled, relief washing over his face. "Then that's all I need to hear." They sat together in silence, the morning light wrapping around them like a quiet blessing. The city below began to buzz with life, but in that room, time felt still. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, and he rested his hand over hers. After a long pause, Daniel whispered, "Do you ever think about how strange it is that out Of all the people in the world, two lives can cross like this and stay. Clara smiled. I used to think love was about fate, but now I think it's about timing and the courage to hold on when it arrives. He nodded. Then I guess our timing was right. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he turned back at the door and looked at her one last time before the ceremony. Whatever happens, Clara, I'll always come to you first. In every storm, in every quiet night. Always. Her chest ached in the best way possible. I'll be waiting, she whispered. After he left, Clara stood by the window again. The city looked brighter now, the sunlight cutting through the clouds. She thought about the night that had just passed. 3 men, 3 different truths. Ethan had come to say goodbye, Mark had come to confess, and Daniel had come to stay. Each visit had shaped her heart in its own way, but it was Daniel's love that anchored her. The night before vows had tested her heart, but the morning after gave her peace. She realized that love wasn't about the ones who arrived first, or the ones who loved her silently. It was about the one who showed up every single day and stayed when it mattered most. Clara looked at her reflection one last time. There were no doubts left, no second thoughts, only quiet strength. She picked up her bouquet, the one she had made herself, and smiled at the white rose tucked between the flowers. It no longer reminded her of what she lost. It reminded her of what she had learned. Love was not a fairy tale. It was a choice. And she was ready to make hers. When the wedding bells finally rang, Clara walked toward the man who had waited for her, not with grand gestures, but with quiet faith. The world around her blurred, and all she could see was Daniel, standing at the end of the aisle, his eyes full of the same steady promise he had given her that morning. The night before vows had been filled with chaos and emotion, but now under the soft light of day, Clara finally understood what love truly meant, not the kind that burned and faded, but the kind that stayed, quietly, faithfully, forever.